Today we're looking at technique endurance exercises. These are essentially exercises that take a technique or a technique exercise and we either loop it or place it in a continuous pattern that moves up the fretboard or up the strings with quite a bit of repetition to point out some new aspects of the technique that you might be overlooking. You know, a basic example, I'm going to show you some exercises from my book, but like a basic example would be a slur exercise. But moving it up one fret at a time. And doing that all the way up the entire neck. And what you'll find once you get to around the 5th or 7th fret, a little bit of fatigue starts to set in, a little bit of laziness maybe, a little bit of sloppiness in your technique and alignment. And this can teach you a lot about your technique. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do this. But the first thing I'll say, a little warning, is that this should never be practiced at the initial stages of learning a technique, as it can lead to bad habits. When you first learn a technique, you want to do it in a small, fragmented way or in isolation in order to learn the technique properly with good alignment, with maximum concentration while you're doing it. You know, you're like looking and being very careful that you're doing it properly and relaxed and musically. And then once you have that technique established in your muscle memory, then you can start adding a little bit of endurance. Maybe at first it's just going up a couple frets, but maybe later it's the whole fretboard. But you don't want to tax yourself too much when you're initially learning a technique, because it can lead to sloppiness. And if you're not refining your technique during that process, it can lead to bad habits. So just a small warning that only do this when you're feeling very, very confident with one of your techniques and you're looking for ways to test it out more in context. So I'm just going to use some examples from my technique book. There's a link for that in the description, but really you can do this with pretty much any technique exercise, whether it be a Giuliani arpeggio or some slur exercises. We'll start with those slur exercises just because that's the one I showed you. So what I find, especially with like my 3rd and 4th finger, okay in the first couple positions, but then as I start to go up the fretboard, I start to feel a little bit of fatigue. You can hear some of my pull-offs are getting a little bit sloppy. My alignment starts to kind of like get thrown. I'm not staying as parallel, and it gets more fatigued, which teaches me a few things. So the first thing is I start to recognize that I'm getting a little bit lazy and sloppy as I progress, and my position gets compromised a little bit after all the shifts. And so it tells me a few things. It tells me that I need to keep the refinement level of the movements really high, and I have to focus on relaxation and alignment during my slurs, because every time I shift, I'm obviously getting thrown off on those aspects just a little tiny bit. And so it gives me something to do, because if the first exercise I practice is just a basic like hammer-on exercise, fine, I can practice that until I get into muscle memory and it's relaxed and I feel really confident with it. Maybe then I add in like a combo with a pull-off and a hammer-on. And I just stop there because I just want to make sure that I'm doing it properly. And quite often when I'm practicing, I'll just do a single one and loop it, just to make sure that I'm playing well, and then I'll go across the strings, which adds a different element to it, right? But then going across all the frets adds yet another element to it. And it reminds me that, oh, I'm not done with working on relaxation. I'm not done working on alignment. I'm not done working on the refinement of those movements. But sometimes it takes like, a little endurance exercise to teach me, to remind me to continue to work on those things. So another example might be bar technique, which lots of people have trouble with. When you're first starting a bar technique, you might start with just like on, off, on, off, on, off. This offers lots of opportunity for your hand to rest. But then later, I start to add a little bit of endurance to it. So I add where I'm holding the notes down now. I have to make sure I'm relaxed, so I'm trying to keep my alignment really good with my bar. I'm trying to like let the weight of my hand do the bar for me. But then if I start shifting up, and I continue to do this on every fret, I'll start to realize what areas of my hand starts to get tired or fatigued, or the alignment gets off. So I'm starting to feel a little bit of tension in this area and this area. But I realized that if I actually like do a reset and just go back to that weight of my hand doing the bar, that it feels a little bit better, and it actually offers relief while I'm playing the bar technique. So that means that every time I shift up, I have to keep that in mind. Instead of holding on to tension, I have to reset and do that weight of the hand thing again. Oh, and now it feels okay. But often what will happen with students is that as they shift up, they retain tension, and they don't stay on the refinement of the technique. They don't stay on the relaxation. So adding some length to your exercises can teach you a lot about your own technique, especially if you've been practicing just like, one thing, but just once, and then you think, oh, that technique's good, I'm good at that. Once you add some of this repetition into it, you might find like, oh, actually, no, I do have a little bit of a tension problem by the time I get to the 5th fret. And then you might find after working on it, on the refinement of your relaxation and keeping your alignment and all those things, that you're able to actually go up to the 7th fret with not too much tension. And then maybe after even more work, you can get up to the 9th fret with no tension. So you can actually work on these other elements of the technique that maybe you wouldn't have thought of if you were just playing like a tiny fragmented exercise. So when we're practicing technique, sometimes we start new exercises to challenge ourselves, but sometimes we can just take the same exercise and just elongate it to teach ourselves about our technique and what might need more refinement. And again, you don't want to do this if your actual technique is weak in some area, because you want to make sure you're feeling pretty confident before you add length to something, because you don't want to build in the muscle memory of bad habits. And sometimes that's what can happen. Even when I was showing you the 3rd and 4th finger combos there, really I should probably refine that a little bit and only do like a couple frets up instead of like the whole fingerboard, because there's obviously between these two fingers when I'm doing the triplet pattern, I'm getting a little bit of tension and misalignment there. So that's something that I should scale back and first just do like a couple of repetitions and then increase it as I feel confident and relaxed with the technique. So yeah, just something to think about when you're practicing your technique exercises over a long period of time.